Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be going through the GCSE Biology Spec and I'm going to be going over the respiratory system, which is the system that you use to breathe in and out and have oxygen and carbon dioxide, have the gas exchange, etc. Without any further ado, let's just get in. So the first thing you need to know is that air will go through the nasal cavity, so you know where your nose is. You just have to say air goes through the nose. The reason we don't say it goes through the mouth, even though it technically does go through the mouth, is because we usually use the mouth for things like the digestive system. So it's just not to get confused. So you say it goes through the mouth. So you breathe in through the nose, then you will go into the trachea. Now the trachea is essentially windpipe. It's surrounded by rings of cartilage that help it not collapse on itself, and that's essentially it. Now the trachea, after the trachea, it diverges into the bronchus, which is just another windpipe that is connected to the lungs right here. Then this bronchus then turns into bronchioles. Then these bronchioles will further subdivide and then reach the little air sacs called alveoli. That is essentially the pathway that air takes through the digestive system, and that's literally it. That is as simple as that is literally the pathway that air takes through the respiratory system, and that's as simple as it gets. So it just goes the opposite way. But how it does it is a bit different. So for example, you see here that the diaphragm. Now the diaphragm contracts when breathing in. So I'll write it down here for you. And then muscles inside the ribs collapse, which you don't need to know for GCSE, but this causes the pressure inside the lungs to increase as the this causes the pressure inside the lungs to decrease and the volume to increase, which allows air to go inside the lungs. And then when breathing out, it is essentially the opposite. Your diaphragm relaxes. Which causes volume inside the lungs to decrease since it gets pushed up, and then as a result the pressure increases and air is forced out of the lungs. Right, so one of the main questions that you'll probably get in GCSE is how is the lungs adapted for gas exchange? So then something you'll need, the most important thing about gas exchange is the alveoli. So you can see here that at the start, when blood goes into the lungs, the blood is low in oxygen and high in carbon dioxide. But we can see here that the alveoli have very thin walls, and the capillaries surrounding it have very thin walls. Capillaries are blood vessels. If you don't know, watch one of my videos if you want to know. And these capillaries will allow carbon dioxide to diffuse out of the capillary into the alveoli, and then oxygen to diffuse into the capillary and then bind to the red blood cells. Note, red blood cells are not actually blue, it's more like they're not red when they don't have oxygen. So the functions of the alveoli is literally for gas exchange, but the adaptations. So adaptations, one of them is that there's lots of alveoli. Now how does this help? Well, you can see that alveoli are very small, and they're also very round, which means that they have a really high surface area to volume ratio. Since you know that smaller things will always have a higher surface area to volume ratio than larger things. So by having millions of alveoli inside of this, lungs, it allows for a really high surface area, and thus gas exchange can happen a lot more efficiently. So this results in an increase in surface area. Another adaptation is that there's a high blood supply. This high blood supply allows there to maintain a concentration gradient of oxygen between the alveoli and the capillary. Now, what is a concentration gradient? To put it in simple terms, concentration gradient is essentially that there is a higher percentage of something in one area and a lower percentage in the other. So here, for example, in the capillaries, oxygen concentration is low, whereas in the alveoli, oxygen concentration is high. So by having a high blood supply, new deoxygenated blood is constantly being introduced, and as a result, it can constantly take oxygen inside of itself and continue having the most efficient rate of transfer as possible. Another thing you need to know are that this maintains concentration gradient. Don't worry about the acronym. CG refers to concentration gradient. So then the next thing you need to know is that alveoli and capillaries have very thin walls. Now, what does thin walls have to do with adaptations for gas exchange? So, if you have a particle, it has to move from one place to the other, but there's a barrier surrounding it. So, for example, if the barrier is this thin, then although it will have some trouble getting through, it will be able to go through eventually, just because of the fact that the wall is very thin. Whereas if you have something, for example, like this, which is a lot thicker, then the particle will have a much more trouble passing through, just because the diffusion pathway has increased. So by increasing the length of the diffusion pathway, it essentially decreases the rate of diffusion. So by having as thin walls as possible, you can increase the rate of diffusion up to its maximum point. And then this is pretty much most of what you need to know, because you will not need to say much else. You just need to say the adaptation and how it helps. So that's it for this. And I hope you found the video useful. Please like, share, subscribe so that I can help more people, and I'll try to post again